Welcome everyone again. Sorry for the mishap there, but I think we're good to go now. Um, my Spanish, se hable español, se chat. There's an opportunity for interpretation, and you will find that in the world. Um, there's a little world icon, and with that world icon, you can choose the language. And we have Daniela on today who will help you with that if you need assistance and you understand the English that I'm attempting to speak. Put your name in the chat, and Daniela can help you if you need help. With that, thanks again for everyone coming, and thank you for bearing with me. Let me turn these off really quick. Go ahead and put your name, organization, and where you're joining us from in chat so that we understand who we're sharing space with today. We're going to do a quick overview of the Thriving Natural World, the Vital Conditions Framework, and a little touch on some data insights to understand the importance of data in this. And then we're going to hear from three of our partners, Canuche, Lisa, and Rodney. We may start with Lisa first, so we may go a little out of order, but that's okay. We can adjust. And then we'll have a nice panel discussion, group discussion if you choose to join in. And then I'll talk a little bit about reflections and takeaways and what's next in the network. So let me ground you quickly in this. The goals of this session are to ground in the thriving natural world as the key to community health. We'll give you concrete examples of how partners are putting this work into action, and we'll highlight the upstream approaches that address the root causes. And finally, we'll build connection and alignment across the network. And before we get started, let's do the first poll. Sorry, I'm going to go a little bit out of order, Meg. We'll do the first poll just to see where we're coming from, what vital conditions you're working in, and we'll wait for Meg to launch that for us. There it is. Where are you joining from? And you may need to scroll down. What vital condition sectors do your organizations represent? That you can choose more than one. And finally, are you a member of the Vital Conditions Network? Awesome. While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and keep us moving right along. So we know that whole communities support whole people, and that's why we focus on that, on the vital conditions which we're all familiar with. All these conditions are deeply connected, and you can't have one without the other. So this framework is really asset-based. It's focused on what we need to thrive, not what's missing. And ultimately, all these conditions are what people need to thrive. Now we're going to zoom in on the thriving natural world. And when we think about these conditions, it's about what people need to truly thrive, like freedom from environmental hazards like extreme heat, fire, flooding, and strong conditions to our food system. It's also about sense of place. What makes a place special? A sense of belonging. How can we learn and connect through nature? And importantly, it's about not just about the environment, it's intertwined with all the other vital conditions. We also have a role in this. Like, how do we create and protect a thriving natural world? This can look like expanding access to nature, building belonging and civic muscle in this area, and ensuring equity in who gets in and experience and benefits from it. Today, you're going to hear from different ways this shows up in practice through community connection and learning, through systems and infrastructure, and through policy, stewardship, and leadership. So, as we think about what it takes to steward a thriving natural world, we also need ways to understand how we are doing. There are many ways to measure this condition, and no single data point tells the whole story. The Vital Conditions Framework offers key indicators that are publicly available, and you can find these on our website. I think Meg is going to be dropping a link in the website for you to peruse at your convenience. You can go in there and take a look at IP3 and other data points. These help give us a shared starting point. Here you'll see areas list of metrics where our region is doing well as better than the state, such as the respiratory hazards, proximity to highways, traffic volume, that one stop sign through town that gives us a headache we've all experienced, and others. But what really reflects environmental health here, for example, is it developed land or is it land used for crops? So, along those broader indicators, we can also look at local data to deepen our understanding. And that helps us to see not just what we're doing well, but where we're facing greater challenges. So, along those broader indicators, we can also look at local data to deepen our understanding. And that helps us see not just where we're doing well, but where we're facing greater challenges. On this slide, you're looking at indicators where a region is falling behind the state. One example is drought. Every county has been affected, but the impact isn't the same everywhere, as you can see in the heat map. Douglas, Grant County are more exposed compared to Okanagan and Chelan counties. Other local data resources can bring us deeper into the reasons we need to be concerned and perhaps prioritize action. Drought can raise water temperatures and lower water levels, and that directly affects dissolved oxygen, the oxygen available in the water. And you say, that's great, Wendy. Thanks for the science lesson. But let's talk about why that's important. As water gets warmer and lower, the oxygen level drops, and that matters because fish and aquatic life depend on the oxygen to survive. When levels drop, species become stressed or die. And this just isn't about the environment, it connects to overall well being. Food systems, fewer healthy fish impacts food and local agriculture. Our economy, recreation, tourism, livelihoods tied to the river. Cultural well being, especially for our tribes where water and fish are central to tradition and identity. Health and safety, water quality affects both ecosystems and people. This is why data matters. It helps us see how challenges in the natural world connect to health, economy, and culture. And it helps us focus on solutions that can improve multiple vital conditions at once. And at the same time, data is just one way of knowing. Graphs and charts can tell us how our communities and environments are doing, but the voices of our residents tell us how it's actually being experienced. So last year, we partnered with the Department of Health to hold dialogues across North Central Washington. There were 17 dialogues or focus groups, as we're commonly known, and one regional town hall with over 295 participants. Through these dialogues, we could understand what is important to people and what's shaping their well-being day to day. So this is beyond the data, is getting the actual voice of the people. So as you read these quotes, you'll see that these individuals see the natural world environment as both a valued asset and a growing concern. And I'll pause a minute just so you can read a couple of those. All right. So we've heard that the data tells us, and we've heard that community members are experiencing. And what both are showing is that the environment isn't always top of mind, but it's deeply influenced well-being in many ways. And this is another way of knowing, not just the quantitative data, but community voices and lived experience telling the story behind the numbers. Together, they show us that these issues are not isolated and they're deeply connected to other parts of well-being. It's why the vital condition framework is so important, that we're not picking off one condition at a time, but we're looking at the framework holistically in everything that we are working on. You'll see on this slide what people shared and how those comments connect to the different vital conditions. Many comments fell under the basic needs for health and safety, that blue bar there, and belonging and civic muscle, that pink bar, which makes sense. Those are often what we think of first when we think about well-being. but all of the vital conditions showed up across conversations. And importantly, most topics didn't fit just one condition, they were highly interconnected. Residents connected environmental health to physical health, outdoor activity, safety, and economic stability. The benefits of nature, such as health, recreation, cultural identity, and social connection, and they depend on other conditions like housing, work, transportation, and community relationships. When those conditions are strong, nature becomes a powerful asset for well being and belonging. And when they're strained, environmental risk can increase stress and deepen inequities. So, as you listen to our speakers, hold both the data and the voices of our community and think about how your work can help move a thriving natural world forward in our region. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick check on our participants. I do see that we have Yvette Joseph joining us in place of Rodney to present for the Colville Tribes. And do we have Canuche on the line
I'm
today?
here. Yeah, I made it.
Awesome. Super cool. So let's move forward. So we'll hear from Canuche Terranella from the Wenatchee River Institute, Lisa Foster from TRED, and Yvette Joseph. Sorry, I had to look at my other screen where I had that. From the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. So let's start with Canuche. Canucci is the executive director of the Wenatchee River Institute, and their work is grounded in the belief that the greatest hope for future comes from connecting people, communities, and the natural world. So I'll turn it over to you, Canucci, and just let me know when you want me to advance your slides.
Thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and share our part of the thriving natural world. Um, it is critical to what I do every day and what our staff of 13 do. So if you could advance the next slide, I can share with you more about what we do. Our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. And if you're unfamiliar with what that means, for Wenatchee River Institute, I like to think of it is as the very first step is creating the pathway to advocacy for the thriving natural world is awareness. And at WRI, we have the opportunity and obligation to help our community engage with the natural world, and we do that on our campus and up and down the Wenatchee Valley. We want to be relevant to all of North Central Washington, be it for birders or hunters, people who are looking for mushrooms or for bears, taking photos or trying to fish. We're eager to help folks engage in ways that help create awareness of this beautiful place that we get to live so that all of this, our community can advocate for it. Will you give us the next slide, please? So we have a campus in Leavenworth, 13 acres on the homelands of the Pisquosa people. And we work with youth and community on this program. You can see a couple of slides there. You see how we are adjacent to the Wenatchee River. A big part of what we do is with youth, but also we have passive engagement. We're essentially an open park. We welcome the public to beautiful community gardens, some ornamental, some native plantings. And we're looking for ways for folks to engage with us on our campus, our 13-acre campus. We've got outdoor spaces for picnics or for presentations. We've got indoor spaces where we hold community events that relate to nature. And we really do want to welcome as many folks as we can from our valley to connect with nature with us. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
Big part of what we do is youth programs. Right now, outside, there's about 75 third graders zooming around, learning about birds. And that fires me up to come to work every day. In addition to field days like we're having right now, we do summer camps. We get kids outside engaging with nature, like you can see in this photo, touching grass, touching trees, looking for macro invertebrates there on the left. Um, Camp activities include rock climbing, paddleboarding, gardening, archery, river floating. Some of my favorite are the simplest. We'll put kids in life jackets and just float them around Blackbird Island. And there's so much fun to be had doing simple stuff like that. This year, we're in collaboration with the Kashmir Valley Museum and ICCA, the Icicle Creek Center for the Arts, to do other camps beyond our locations. We've had enough demand that the limitations of bathrooms on our campus have given us the opportunity to spread out and send our naturalist educators to other communities so we can work with more kids in the summer. We also do after school programs that serve the Leavenworth community right here on our campus. And we also send our naturalists to do after school programming in Wenatchee and Orondo to bring some naturalist education into those schools. We also got a planetarium that inflates, and we take around the valley to connect with curriculum needs of different schools and also give a new engaging experience for folks. Um, I think when I think about how this connects to the vital conditions, we have a problem. Screen-based knowledge is really a priority in our schools right now, and to the detriment of outdoor experiences. Outdoor experiences are no longer being prioritized in school budgets, and many kids are missing out on the curiosity and confidence that is built by spending time outside. Thriving Together North Central Washington stepped up this year to help us solve this problem, gave us a big grant to help us with our traveling naturalist program, and I appreciate it. Those funds have kept us doing our work this year and help us set up for next year. I don't see any imminent changes to state budgets. So unfortunately, this is not a problem that's going to be unique to this year, but we are turning back to our community and asking them to support this important work that we're doing. And I think it resonates with a lot of community members, and we're going to keep doing it. So hopefully we can keep getting the community to support us. Can we give us the next slide, please? The other thing that we do is community programs. Wendy's presentation talked about belonging and civic muscle. Well, belonging starts with feeling like you're a part of a community. Um, what you can see on this slide are some of my favorite events. We have on the top the Trashin' Show, which is a fun community event that's coming right up around the corner. Next week, we have the community fashion show, Trashin' Show, which you can see are kids and adults dressing up and strutting their stuff in their finest reused garbage fashion. Um, it gives a fun opportunity for a free event and enjoy the springtime. You should come join us next Friday to see that in action. In addition to outdoor free events like that, we have Red Barn events where we talk about a little more intellectual, usually, events that are content connected to the natural world, either in engaging with it like a ski film or a rock climbing idea, or a very recent popular one was What Happens Next in the Enchantments. It's a place that folks have been engaging with so much, a little bit to the detriment of the wilderness characteristics of that place. So we hosted a community meeting where we talked about best practices and what could happen next there. As you can see on the bottom there, that's a picture of our Dia de los Reyes celebration, the beginning of this year. One of the things we noticed in our community programs is that we have good turnout from the same sort of people all the time. And we wanted to increase the presence of Spanish-speaking members of our community in our community programs. And so one of the ways we did that was to meet with affinity groups who had a community need, which was to celebrate Dia de los Reyes, which is a celebration that happens at the beginning of January, celebrating the Three Kings march to give gifts to baby Jesus. So we engaged with that community and gave an opportunity for doing some outdoor activities on WRI's campus and learning and play with the kids. And then a procession to the fest hall where there was dance and tamales and singing under the gazebo downtown. It was a really fun event. We've done it 3 years in a row. We'll continue doing that. But it is an example of the different ways that we engage with community with the hope that we can create a community that engages with and takes care of the natural world. Next slide, please. I wanted to throw this one in because I just thought it was so cool. This is a note from the notebook of one of our volunteers who was recently presenting. Last weekend, we had a Bear Bonanza celebration at WRI that was actually put on and hosted by the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers of Washington. And it was all about bears, and one of the tabling events was teaching kids about bears, and we had a essentially a choose your own adventure story that described bear behavior, made children or adults who came to our table answer questions as if they were a bear, and then we talked about what bears do seasonally around our community, and we used real landmarks that are relevant to our community, like Icicle River or the Wenatchee River, and the elevation and the ecosystem that is represented at that elevation, and then how bears move through it across the seasons. So this is just a sketch. We ended up with a better piece of art to talk about it, but I think it is a good representation of the sort of science and fun and learning that we try to engage our community with. That we all live in the same neighborhood of these bears and don't really think much about how they're moving around our community as well. Next slide, please. Another way that folks engage with WRI is volunteer work. As you know, in December, there was a major winter storm in Leavenworth, knocked down over 25 trees on our campus and put us out of commission for a week or two, but the community really came in and helped us clean up afterwards. So though we still have lots of giant root balls around our campus, our trails are all open, and we can only do that with volunteer work. And volunteering is one of those ways that builds community and does good. So we wanted to put a plug out there for volunteer work at WRI. It is part of what makes it work. And then one more slide. That's how you can connect with me. See Terranella at Wenatchee River Institute.org. If you ever have a question or an idea, I'm looking for opportunities to connect with other community groups who engage with the thriving natural world. If you ever need a presentation space or want to share marketing opportunities, we're great at that. I find that, a big part of what we are is sort of a little publication house. So promoting other people's events or hosting their events on our campus is a big thing that we can do to help out this thriving together community. That's the end of my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Canuche. I truly appreciate this is just a great example of how an organization can look at the people who they are serving or who they're trying to bring in and truly creating an inclusive space by celebrating cultural events. What a great way of bringing affinity groups together to see what is it that they or how do they see the environment and what would they like, and then creating something from that and inviting the community. So thank you for sharing. As you'll notice from Canucci's presentation, getting youth and community members outside and engaged with nature or building lifelong relationships with the natural world. And there's other vital conditions. You may have heard them through that. You heard the lifelong learning as they're learning about the environment, the naturalists going out, even beyond their campus, the belonging and civic muscle, perfect opportunity to engage, exercising that civic muscle. And of course, basic needs for health and safety, the physical activity of getting out, the fresh air, and all that goes with that. So the more we're connected to nature and to each other, the more likely we are to care for our spaces. And you heard that in Canucci's presentation. So next we have Lisa Foster, and Lisa's Associate Director of TREAD. And TREAD works to bring partners together to create sustainable outdoor recreation opportunities across our region. Lisa, I'll turn it over to you and just let me know when you want me to advance your slides.
Perfect, thank you. Um, like Wendy just said, I'm the associate director for TREAD, and TREAD does stand for Trails Recreation Engagement Advocacy and Development. And I've been with TREAD since 2022, and it's one of those backbone organizations that supports many partners. I think currently we have about 65 partners within our collaborative network in Okanagan, Grant, Chelan, and Douglas counties. And what's unique about TREAD is we were one of the original game changers that came out of Our Valley, Our Future. And it came from a need to focus on the thriving natural world and the belonging and civic muscle piece of our community and help people be able to engage in outdoor recreation safely and in a healthy way. And so go ahead and go next slide. Our mission is to collaborate with diverse partners and drive sustainable outdoor recreation in North Central Washington. And one of the ways that we do that is being that backbone organization. And so, what is unique about TREAD and part of the creation from Our Valley, Our Future as a game changer was we didn't need another membership organization such as Evergreen Central Chapter, Mountain Bike Alliance. We didn't want to compete for members. We wanted to be able to work with partners that were membership driven and more boots on the ground organizations and collaborate with those partners to bring more resources to our communities. Next slide. Our vision is to collaborate with all of our partners, and that includes land managers, user groups, and community partner networks. We work to preserve natural landscapes and remove barriers to access, create sustainable recreation opportunities, and foster strategic partnerships. We want these strategic partnerships to last in the long term. So when we're looking at funding, we want to make sure that any project that we are helping, that it is sustainable for next generation. And many people that live and work in our region know that a lot of times projects start and then there's no plan for operations and maintenance. So TREAD tries to be mindful of that so that we can ensure that the region's trails, waterways, and wild places thrive for generations to come. Go ahead, next slide. So, our acronym, Trails and Recreation, Engagement, Advocacy, and Development. And you can kind of think about how we do this through community initiatives and and it kind of showcases that even though we're a local nonprofit, we get called to statewide organizations to help them kind of be the voice for our North Central Washington region to understand how impacts are happening from Olympia to here. Obviously, with federal contracts and with Chelan County having such high public land access, we definitely are being impacted by changes that are happening federally as well. Next slide. So we bring together about 65 collaborative partners, and please reach out to me if you currently don't have an invitation. It's open to all nonprofit land managers, collaborative partners in the four counties. And what is exciting about that is we meet quarterly. We meet at the Pybus Market area in that back room. And what is lovely about that is we bring together partners. We usually have about 45 individuals representing organizations from across North Central Washington. And from there, we also have quarterly work groups. And these work groups are broken down into three. We have enhance outdoor recreation. And the purpose of enhancing outdoor recreation is also the belonging and civic muscle. So, one of our planning work groups is called Belonging in the Outdoors. It was also originally an Our Valley, Our Future program, and in collaboration with North Central Washington Equity Alliance. We started the Belonging in the Outdoors series. We also have an event on Thursday, 4/23. And I will definitely drop that in the chat because we are bringing an adaptive mountain biking film to the region. Wenatchee Valley Museum is graciously hosting us. Visit Chelan County is our main sponsor. Chelan Douglas Land Trust and Central Washington Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance will also be in attendance to talk about how, as a community, we could be supporting adaptive mountain biking and opportunities in the North Central Washington region. We have many great recreational areas like Number Two Canyon, that's right outside of Wenatchee. And there are a lot of opportunities to look at those trails and collaborate with individuals with disabilities that want to continue to mountain bike that may have had an injury, and be able to widen those trails so that they can maintain access. We try to promote diverse recreational opportunities. We work with partners that are land managers that are trying to find ways to make their sites more accessible. And that can be from an access standpoint of feeling like a trailhead is not safe because there's no lighting, or the place where you can park doesn't feel like parking your vehicle there would be safe, or you don't have access because you don't have a vehicle. And so we try to collaborate with our link partner to be able to increase, and we're still working on this, to increase access to trailheads beyond Saddle Rock and a few other locations. We want to improve infrastructure and amenities. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is the bathrooms. And you want to be able to feel safe in that environment. We need better lighting in a lot of locations. Canuche had mentioned the Enchantments project. TRED is working currently with the Forest Service to try and figure out how we can keep those toilets open and get them cleaned out. But with their low staffing, it's just a problem that just a long-term solution needs to be brought up. But what happens is when those bathrooms get vandalized or overfull, they just get locked. And then the people don't stop coming, and people still need to have amenities in the wilderness. And so you can just imagine if you don't have somewhere to go, it's just ending up everywhere, all over the trails and into the wilderness. So that's that work group. Our secondary work group is Reconomics, and it is exactly as it sounds. It's bringing and understanding that recreation in our area brings in about $999 million through tourism. And when I say tourism, basically the definition of that is somebody that's traveling over 50 miles. And so if you can think about that with Okanagan, Grant, Chelan, and Douglas, that is ourselves visiting each other as well. So it's not just the west side coming over. It's me and my family going up to Lake Chelan to play on Lake Chelan that day. I'm a tourist in that scenario. It's not my backyard. When we're there, we're gonna stop and have pizza. We're gonna get gas. So even if you're only traveling those 50 miles to that location, or if I live in Wenatchee, but if I'm going up to Leavenworth, I still kind of define myself as a tourist. I'm bringing tourist dollars into that region when I'm utilizing those outdoor recreation opportunities. And then our third work group is conservation, sustainability, and stewardship. I will share a little bit more about our One for the Outdoors program in a minute. So I'm going to jump to Goat Head Warriors. Many of you have probably heard about Goat Head Warriors. It's a nonprofit that's been around in the region. And as they were trying to figure out their next step for the next 20 years, they reached out to Tread and said, "Hey, Tread, would you help us make sure that goat heads stay off of the Apple Capitol Loop Trail?" And we said, "Absolutely, we can take that on." And so right now we have a really amazing working board, and they go out and make sure that no goat heads end up on the Apple Capitol Loop Trail. If you've never ridden a bike or pushed a stroller, basically a goat head is an end game. It makes your tire flat, you can't refill it, and so goat heads are one of those things that once they keep going, you can't really come back from it. So we try to make sure there's not a single plant on the loop trail. We try to advocate for friends of groups and planning for access as basically a friends group would want. So if you kind of think of um, if you want to save the enchantments, like join the Friends of group for that. And right now, Wenatchee Outdoors is doing a really amazing work with getting volunteers up into that region. And so we just try to support those type of projects that boots on the ground that are happening. We also try to help ambassador programs across the North Central Washington region. So Visit Chelan County and Intiat just launched their program last year. We just helped secure some funding and provide some administrative support to that program, and it was amazing. Obviously, last year, INEAT was very busy with wildfire and wildfire personnel, and it was imperative that we had ambassadors at trail locations letting people know what was closed, what was not safe. And then we also had to move around. We were going to have a Silver Falls ambassador site, but because of the wildfires, we had to shut that down. We ended up moving to the Ineat Park. So a lot of great work happening there. Go ahead, Wendy. Next slide. So one of our biggest projects that you have probably been hearing about is the Chelan-Douglas Transportation Council's Pathways Master Plan. So the Chelan-Douglas Transportation Council had hired a third-party engineering firm called Alta, and Alta was able to do a 2-year planning grant and engineering to decide and reach out to the community about potential pathways that would expand the Apple Capitol Loop Trail. They ended up finding that there are 4 potential pathways: Chelan to Manson, Leavenworth to Kashmir to Wenatchee, and Malaga to Wenatchee, and Rock Island to East Wenatchee. TRED's job is in the advocacy arm, and so we are continuously advocating for this as an active transportation plan because it would be a non-motorized pathway to connect our communities. Next slide. Another big project underway is our Upper Wenatchee Valley Sustainable Trails Project. Currently, in collaboration with federal, state, and local partners, we're working to facilitate this project to create non-motorized trail systems where there already is recreation. And so uh, one of the things that occurs is we have a lot of trail users that utilize a trail, or paragliders that are using a hill or a mountainside to launch, take off. And a lot of these areas are actually not, they're not sanctioned spaces. That means that there's no amenities, there's no safe parking, there's not a agreed upon recreational use. And so what we're trying to do is take this acre, these 240,000 acres, and figure out what already is happening and figure out a way to create safe and sustainable recreation that is already happening in this region. What that ends up doing is we end up dispersing recreation from the overused areas, such as the enchantments in the wilderness, and getting people to utilize recreational areas that are sanctioned with proper amenities and parking. We want to improve accessibility. We want to be able to have parking lots and trailheads that have disability parking spaces, bathrooms that are accessible, and ADA accommodations. We want to diversify local economic base. And so we want to be able to take a user of let's just say the Olalla Hay Canyon area. And we want them to be able to look at the trailhead that they're utilizing and give back to the community in which they're recreating if they are traveling for that. Next slide, please. The final project that I'm going to highlight with everyone today is our Mansfield Branch Line Trail project that is currently being planned in Douglas County. The Great Northern Railway used to run through the Mansfield branch line. The main engine is at the locomotive park in Wenatchee, right off of the bridge. And so that rail line basically got bought up into private land. And what ended up happening is we had a private landowner that ended up buying a bunch of this in easement property and said, I want this to be a motorized, non-motorized trail corridor. And he basically gifted it. And with that is the potential to increase public land access for Douglas County, because currently Douglas County is about 17.6 public land, whereas Chelan County is about 83%. Huge difference. It's basically the inverse. So obviously, like Douglas County just needs more public land access. It's a lot of private land and farmland. And this project would utilize the existing former rail line. And the project would make it a continuous 42-mile multimodal pathway for recreation, and it would connect 6 rural communities such as Mansfield, Winthrop, and Alstown all the way to Palisades. Next slide. The program that I mentioned on one of my previous slides is we started this program called One for the Outdoors. What's the reason for this program? We had originally started launching this program before the federal budget cuts occurred. And then it just became imminent that this program get launched quicker than we were expecting because public lands are in crisis. We have rising visitor use, years of insufficient funding. The federal staffing cuts are threatening our public lands, putting them at risk, putting people at risk when they're recreating. But also, some areas, such as the enchantments, are being overused at this point. Two, there is a huge economic impact in our region. According to the 2020 analysis, outdoor recreation is currently contributing about 720 million to our local economy, but the new one that just was released for 2025 shows $999 million is a boost to our local economy through recreation. And then, so the reason why that's important is if somebody is traveling more than those 50 miles to a location, what we want to be doing is helping them find a way to give back to the land that they're recreating on. For example, if somebody is going to go mountain bike up number 2 canyon and there is a sign that says One for the Outdoors, support your trail builders, Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance, for example, there'd be like a QR code or something where they could give back and say, I don't have the time or capacity to volunteer to rebuild or maintain the trail that I just utilized, but I can donate some funds to the Boots on the Ground organization that is doing that. They could end up down at, let's just say, Hellbent Tap Room down at Pybus, and they would be able to give back to this program by just buying a pint of beer, and then Hellbent gives $1 back to Tread. So we have many partners, and I did drop that. Oh, no, I haven't dropped that into the chat yet. Let me do that real quick. So you can follow that program. I think you can't probably link on that slide. So that's the One for the Outdoors program. The third component of this is that we are a key attraction. Our region is very popular. People choose to visit here, but also we noticed with 2020 and people being able to work online that we had a lot of people choose our region to move. And we know that that also impacts housing. And so we recognize that recreation and being this key attraction location, that it also is causing some economic impact in that way as well. Next slide. And then we just want to thank our partners. So these are just a few of our key partners that help Tread do the work that we do. So that's the end of my slide.
Thank you, Lisa. You guys are doing some amazing things, just like the Wenatchee River Institute, and it's very informative. As someone said in the chat, I had no idea you guys do all these things for both you and Wenatchee River Institute. So we can look at what Lisa shared. It's a strong example of systems level upstream work. You may hear us talking about that often, systems level or upstream. This was a great example. By designing and coordinating trail systems and outdoor infrastructure, TREAD is shaping how people access and interact with the natural environment. And you heard through her, sorry about that. Well, you heard through her presentation um, different vital conditions, including the thriving natural world, obviously, but you also heard about transportation, you heard about meaningful work, and health and safety. So this is what multi-solving looks like, and system change. So just kind of pointing those out as we're learning together. So finally, we have Yvette Joseph, who will be joining us from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. And Yvette is a member of the Colville Tribes and serves as the Transboundary Manager and CERCLA Coordinator. Super fun. She's a master trained social worker with a concentration in social planning and administration. And she spent 8 years working with the U.S. Senate and Senators Dan Evans and Dan Inouye. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Yvette. Let's see, get there um, for the presentation.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Great. White Hall East Yvette Joseph. I am, as was noted, a member of the Colville Confederated Tribes. My particular bands are the Moses Columbia Band and the Okanagan Band. I do have some blood in the Sinaiaks, the Arrow Lakes folks. I have ties to the Palouse and to the Methow, and it's diverse. My great grandfather was Chief Moses, who established the executive order for the Colville Reservation. And back in those days, you had to travel by canoe down the Columbia to Portland, and then catch a steamer ship from Portland to San Francisco, and then a train ride from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. So a trip to the capital took about 2 months. And anyway, he went to make a couple of different trips to Washington. And, when I think of Wenatchee, and I just looked at the map that my predecessor, Lisa, had shared, Badger Mountain and Moses Coulee are some of the territories right now where we would be spending, and we have tribal members who will spend much time digging for camas and bitter roots and sunflowers. There was a root feast here, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, and we celebrate our natural foods, and traditional foods are really very important to our health and our well-being. And all of you probably, I hope, do get to benefit from the salmon in the Columbia River. We have really worked hard for the last 20, 25 years to build up and return the salmon to the upper Columbia River and into Canada. And I think that I was trying to tell my friends at the fishery department that it would be so cool if some of our salmon had these like little cameras connected to their heads or something, because they are so mighty, they are so wonderful and tenacious that they are making it up over Chief Joseph Dam. And I'm not quite certain how they get over the spillways, but they are making it through the third powerhouse. And I'm a graduate of Lake Roosevelt High School in Coulee Dam. So the Grand Coulee Dam is a mile wide and a mile thick. So when they're making their way through the third powerhouse, they're making it through those spillways that were built in the 70s, and they're making their way into Canada. So like our tribal members, our salmon are very tenacious and resilient and still here. So you can see to the right well, let me just say, to the left is our tribal seal, and it represents the 12 tribes and the coyote. And you can see it was 1872 when that executive order was enacted into law. And to the right is a map of our traditional territories, which extend down um, to the Wenatchee, to Chelan, to the Leavenworth, where the salmon are running, the Chinook salmon as well. And so you can see the Moses Coulee, the Palouse lands down around Pasco, and then the Chief Joseph Band of Nez Perce, which on my grandmother's side, she's from Pendleton. So I have some ties, and people always think because my last name is Joseph, I'm from the Joseph Band, but it's not actually that. My our traditional name is Camotius, and they thought that sounded like Joseph, so they put that down when they enrolled us way back in the 1800s. So, but our land also extends far north into Canada, and we have won court cases to have our hunting rights restored in Canada, and are involved with some cases involving toxic mining that has been coming from Canada down into the Columbia River. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. So we are one of the first tribes in the country to have our own water quality standards. And we have a designation as treatment as sovereign. So we're equivalent to the state in many respects with respect to the Clean Water Act. And we have our non-point source funding as well. And I will talk to you a little bit later about your survey and some of the indicators that you had studied, and just give you a sense of how we're addressing those issues. But I first became familiar with Thriving Together with John and the director with Kyle Dizitel in work 2 years ago on a large $20 million community change grant. And we spent 2 months on that grant. And I still swear that we would have won that grant, but our tribal government had a priority for the community of Inchelium, and so we had to defer to them. But we were intending to work with the schools and bring a lot of the environmental improvements to their community, or to those programs to help our community. So, but anyway, that's sometimes our leadership have different priorities from our staff, and we just have to accept that and move forward. And so it gave us basically shovel-ready projects and letter text that we can use for the development of other grants. And so some of what Lisa had talked about, some of what Canuche had talked about, the recreational aspect. I have two children, they're 32 and 31, and we used to live in Colorado, but they are junior park rangers in terms of the National Park Service. And so it used to be our goal to visit as many national parks as we could, from the Colorado and the Dakota regions to California and Death Valley and the Pacific. And we've pretty much seen most of the national parks. And so the initiatives to try to enhance recreation and to enhance the economy through that process. I mean, certainly I've been a spender, and I really feel great that I have some of the most beautiful land in the country. So it's great to be here. And I wish I could give all of you a hearty handshake and thank you for your work. So, but I'm here in Nispelem, Washington. It is the tribal governmental site along Highway 155. And when you travel from Spokane into Grand Coulee and then come through Highway 155 through Coulee Dam to Omak, that highway is impacted by our Environmental Trust Department. We have these beavers on a little lake called Rebecca Lake, and those beavers are diverting the water. And sometimes that flooding takes place, and we haven't had that much rain this year, thank goodness. I mean, we wanted to have more snowpack, and it's been troublesome because Mount Moses Mountain, which is sort of directly north of Nispelem, it's a beautiful mountain. It's a place where I've worked on the lookout tower when I was working my way through college. But It had only 6 inches of snow this year when we're used to having at least 11 feet of snow. And I'm certain that you've seen some of those same conditions in the Wenatchee and on the North Cascades Highway. Um, those things I tried to monitor because it's important for our huckleberries, and all of you probably know how wonderful huckleberries are. We even have a feast for our huckleberries, and in addition to our salmon. So we celebrate our natural resources and with hopes that they will be replenished because they're so critical to the care and feeding of our people. So anyway, so let's move on from there and to the next slide. We are truly environmental stewards. It's sort of um, it's an innate um, um, value or innate characteristic of our people. We share many cultural and social teachings, and we try to really do what we can to advance our native language. But the responsibilities that exist between Indigenous people and the land, the water, and the animals, we work to sustain them. And so the Columbia River is really a valuable resource, and it's so important to keep that water as clean and pristine as possible. So we're not outright against mining ventures, but they have impacted our waters. And so we're trying to do what we can to ensure that we don't have contamination affecting the balance of the people, native and non-native in our communities. So we are taught very much to value our water. And I know my native name, my Indian name is like from where the spring water comes. And so without water, we wouldn't survive. But we pay respect to it. It's always the first thing that we ingest when we participate in our traditional ceremonies. So if you want to move forward, this picture here it's actually a salmon ceremony. So in the 1980s and 90s, there were federal and state scientists who began to document the shockingly high concentrations of metals in the sediment and in the fish tissue of the Upper Columbia River. And the tribe in 1999 petitioned the Environmental Protection Agency to investigate pollution in the Columbia River between the US and Canada border and the Grand Coulee Dam. So Lake Roosevelt's very vast and it's very beautiful, but it does have black slag in it. And if you ever go to Spring Canyon, which is kind of like the swimming hole for the Grand Coulee Dam area besides Banks Lake, it's very beautiful beach. It's where we have like every year the graduation parties are there. Everybody goes to that particular spot. I can't say exactly where people go in Wenatchee. I imagine they go to Lake Chelan. Lake Chelan is actually a part of our trust territory. And of course, many of you from Wenatchee or the Chelan Douglas community probably attend or have been to the casino there in Mansfield. We have another casino in Omak, Okanagan, and then one in Coulee Dam. And in one of my roles, I've formerly served as a commissioner with the Gaming Commission. So I'm pretty familiar with all three of the casinos and a lot of their tourism and activity. And I've been to several of the vineyards in the region. I'm not a wine drinker per se, but I have friends who like to go and take up and enjoy their wine. So apparently, I think there are 23 vineyards in the Chelan region. And so even visiting those to see what they're like, it's kind of fun. But I don't spend all my time doing that, but I try to get down that way. So, but we've worked closely with the EPA and we've been working on the Columbia River for quite some time. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in 2024, the area was officially designated a Superfund site. And when Wendy introduced me as the CER CLA Circula Coordinator, it stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response and Compensation and Liability Act. And so Circula is used to help clean up some of the areas that have been severely impacted by contamination or toxins. for a variety of reasons. And in our community, it deals with mining from the north. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is the smelter in Trail, BC, which is 10 miles north of the Canadian border. And it was it was established in 1895, and the company at that time was processing lead and zinc. And so the smelter was built on the banks of the river, and all of those water tailings were poured into the Columbia River, making its way down to the Pacific. In 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 I talked about the park down in Cooley Dam, and one of the things about our Grand Coulee, I'm sorry, but one of the things about Lake Roosevelt is that there's this black slag, and I have a couple of bottles. I'll grab one of them. I'm sorry, I should have grabbed it earlier. This is a jar of black slag that I got from Northport, and it is mostly, it's at nighttime. It has a reflection. It's like magnetic, and it's also has a reflection like mirrors, but it's principally lead and zinc and about 6 other chemicals that are toxic to our water systems. So we
Yvette,
have
I
fish.
think your camera is off. Can you turn your camera on so we can see that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I let me. Okay, yeah. Sorry. I thought I was on video all the time, so sorry about that. Okay, so here is the jar of of sand. Okay. It's when you when you go to Spring Canyon, and we went there last year to welcome the regional administrator from the EPA, Emma Picone, and the circular coordinator. And when we went down, our consultants went to check to see if the flag was definitely there. You know, we're on the beach. Should we show Miss Picone, Administrator Picone, you know, sort of what the residue was from the smelter? And you know, it's more than 120 years since the smelter opened, and there's been tons of this waste that's been dropped into the river. But there was a lady with a little toddler, probably about 2 to 3 years old, who was in the water. And you know, I know some of the indicators talk about extreme heat. Um, we were getting, you know, temperatures of 90 to 95 um, about that same time in June that the administrator was here. And so, but there was a lady with the baby and sitting in the black swirls, and she didn't feel it was her role to tell the woman that maybe you shouldn't be there, maybe you should move because you probably don't want your baby to ingest this in case she happens to try to feed herself or, you know, take water or something. But anyway, it's just was an awkward situation. We have not issued health advisories, human health advisories. We have issued fish advisories. It's really, you shouldn't have a fish from the Columbia River. You shouldn't eat more than one per week. Um, there's enough toxin there to cause problems later on. So, but that's the smelter that was releasing this resource. And in British Columbia, the medical officer for the province issued a report in December that showed that children who grew up in Trail, BC, in this town, now have lead in their blood, and it's appearing in their DNA as well. So they're looking at this as a public health matter as well in Canada. And we've been funded by the EPA to sort of look at transboundary issues, you know, regarding water quality standards in Canada versus the US. and water quality and environmental assessment policy with respect to British Columbia and Washington State. So we're doing a policy analysis on that with the environmental Trans-Valley Watershed Grant now. And it's a 3-year project, so we'll measure how the water is, this year and next year. But here you can see a picture of Lake Roosevelt, the Upper Columbia River, and the mass of lead, zinc, cadmium, arsenic, and mercury discharge, and the effluent as well as air emissions from 1923 to 2005. This is how many tons of waste and contaminants were likely to have made their way into the Columbia River. So there were minimum discharges, and it does not include spills or stormwater or contaminated groundwater or contributions from burning coal. But not all of this lines up perfectly. Sometimes it's sort of harder to put these charts in with a scenic background in PowerPoint versus Excel, but you can sort of see the tons of zinc and the tons of lead and arsenic, cadmium, and mercury. So I'm not going to test you on this, but it's just good for you to know sort of how much is out there. And because of that, we filed a case against the mining company Tech Caminco, which is now known as Tech Resources. You can move forward. We have been winning on this case. It's been more than 20 years, but in a landmark decision, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the rights of tribes to sue for damages from pollution. And all 3 court justices from the Ninth Circuit Court ruled in our favor and are allowing us to not only seek for damages under the Natural Resources Damages Act, but also an added element called tribal service loss. And so I've been really busy working to plan a job training initiative. And I know from the Bunker Hill, which is a Superfund site in Kellogg near the Coeur d'Alene Lake, they had 250 jobs that were sort of created by the company who was responsible for the pollution, and with some funding from the EPA. And so we're expecting we will be doing the same, mostly trying to recruit heavy equipment operators and others who can help us with some of the sediment adjustments. Not everything will be disrupted. We also still have our fish hatchery and our fish that are making their way north, and so we want to make certain that it's not that the breakup of sediment isn't going to ruin the river either. So, and it's utilized very much for recreational purposes. So we've got to sort of work out some of those details. But the case is almost ready to go to the final review. It's being considered by the Eastern District Court of Washington, and what we've heard is that it could potentially be $1 billion settlement. So we're sort of moving on that basis. So we can move forward. Next slide.
Do you see it? I think there's a delay from when I click to when you actually see them.
Okay. So we continue our fight and trying to do what we can to protect our resources. They're not the only mining company that's been on a reservation. We have the Buckhorn Kinross gold mines on the north half. There's, at least on our reservation, there are probably about 1,100 mines that have been built, and we have to be very protective of our forest fighters and our wildfire, warriors who are out there trying to stop the fires from encroaching on us. But a significant percentage of our children they avoid using the river. They face certain obstacles, but we still continue to try to sustain our traditional stewardship. And if you could move back one slide, that would be great. There's a canoe that this one's a canoe. It's the what they call Salesian canoe. This is more of a cedar war canoe. And so at the Kettle River, or Kettle Falls, I'm sorry, there's usually an annual celebration that's begun about the canoe journeys on our river. And it's really to take and help us with our prayers to continue our traditions. And so you can see there's a gentleman to the left there with the traditional way we smoke our salmon on sticks, and they have a large feast during this um, return to the Kettle Falls. So we're just continuing to sustain and support our stewardship obligations through the land, through the water and the plants and the animals. And there's a lot that goes into, the way of thinking from, what's practical, what's theoretical, philosophical, and much of it has been kind of lost because of the loss of the language, but we're working hard to bring that back. And we have 3 different dialects, so we're continuing to see that each 3 of those dialects are supported with staff. So that's been sort of a more recent initiative, and you can kind of see. I know one of the very important people in Wenatchee is one of my friends, Randy Lewis. And Randy does a lot to try to support the salmon sharing. And he does that down in, I think, Eniat and a terrace area. So, there's just not as many ceremonial things that happen down around the Wenatchee, but there are good things still happening in our region. So, but I'm always surprised when I see all of the salmon that come up and all the fishermen are out in Bridgeport waiting to net and pull in a salmon. And I know not this year, but 2 years ago, we were really worried that we had about 350,000 salmon who were coming up from Wells Dam into before Chief Joe Dam. And so some of them migrate up, either up the Eniat or up the Okanagan rivers. And those rivers were too warm. So the fish were sort of pooling around Brewster and Bridgeport. And so we were trying to tell our friends, go buy a fishing license and go out and fish because there's some great fish that are out there. And several did. But fortunately, it cooled down at that time in August. And some of those fish then made it up through the Okanagan into Pursuit and Smokemean and other rivers systems. So they've been making their way up into Canada, and we're quite happy about that. But you can kind of see this is the feasting and celebration of the fish. So if you could go to the next slide. Next slide.
It's clicked. I think there's just that delay.
Okay. Well, basically, I'll just mention the success that we've had and then answer the question that Wendy had posed. But the tribe's vision includes restoring the ability of people to understand and describe and appreciate the natural environment of the river. And they use our language, the Insokchin, and try to have people understand that from this particular side of the reservation area. We have 4 districts. We have OMAC, which is probably about 35% of the people. We have the Nispelem district, which is about 33 to 35% of the people. We have a small community in the mountain range over Keller Ridge to the Cody George mountain range, and that is Keller's about 10 to 15% of the population. And then on the far side in the eastern portion of our reservation, we have Inchelium, and they're some of the primary people who've been impacted because of the contamination from the Petcominco company. So they're working very hard on revitalizing traditional cultural practices associated with the natural environment of the river. And for us, ultimately, it's about empowerment for the people to engage in positive and culturally appropriate and sustainable stewardship of the natural environment of the river. So that concludes the slides, but I had looked at Thriving Natural World on the Thriving Together community website. And we've had, because of the issues with the Upper Columbia River, I have managed a project. It's an environmental justice grant that addresses respiratory health issues with air quality. And I've worked closely with our general air quality program people. We have what they call BAMs, and they're larger air quality machines. And then we have purple air monitors. And we were working to try to get at least 52 on the Upper Columbia River. There are now probably about 40, 45. Some of them kind of lose their power, but they're great for online monitoring. And WSU has some air quality monitors, purple monitors out there. But when we made a presentation in Chilean to sort of get more people to put them in their yards, they had to have electrical access. And there were lots of senior citizens who were at that meeting. And one of them, particularly Randy Fry, has a sister, Elizabeth Fry, who's a former tribal judge who lives in Omak. And she's active with her area office on aging. So pretty soon we had the two ladies saying, we need to get all of our senior citizen centers where they have daily lunch equipped with purple air monitors so they could share all the information. So we really believe truly in the power of our elders and the ability for them to share and communicate information. I know my mother, who passed away in December, she used to chair the Colville Tribal Environmental Protection Alliance. And even before there was online communication, they had been able to get a grant, and it was from a nonprofit organization like Thriving Together, but they were able to get funding to buy 15 fax machines. And these grandparents were sharing data about the molybdenum and copper impacts of tailings and leaching. And they were worried that the water from that mine at Mount Toman would be built. And if so, they would have wiped out the mountain and destroyed the water downriver. So, but those elders had fact sheets, and I just really like this. This is their little flyer, the Environmental Protection Alliance, a little NGO, but they were able to share the 8-page fact material to the tribe, and we had a referendum. And that's where the whole entire tribe gets a chance to vote, the 18 and older voters. And they voted generally about 75% against no mining on the reservation because they didn't want to see our water be destroyed. And their theme was working closely with people from the Okanagan Highlands Association, some of the folks that put on the barter fair up there in Chenasket. They were a part of this advocate group of grandparents who were just sharing information with their kids and their grandkids to vote no on the referendum. And so it's really important that they were empowering us and empowering others to take responsibility for the reservation. So anyway, under the air quality programs that we have, we monitor what the impacts are principally from wildfire or from our wood stoves. And, probably many of you, like many of my brothers and sisters, have been out in the woods cutting for firewood for your home places. And it's important to update those stoves these days. And so we do a lot of education around that. And we've been doing what we can to abate the wildfire incidents. We have a very strong, progressive wildfire fighting team. We've had a helicopter team. I know myself, I've worked as a dispatcher on the issues, but I have nephews that work and try to restore culverts and other areas that have been impacted by fire. So we're dealing with the drought as much as we can, because what we've learned from Moses Mountain, about the limited snowpack. We really understood what that meant, and I don't know how things were in Chelan, Douglas, or the Methow, or even on the west side of the Okanagan, up towards Canada. But we have Owl High Lake, and we have Twin Lakes, we have other lakes besides Lake Roosevelt. But Ojai has always been for Nispelum one of the best ice fishing spots in the winter. And this winter we did not have enough ice for people to safely go out and land um, fish out of their fishing holes. So that's an impact of climate change. And we're trying really hard for our tribal members to educate our tribal members about those particular impacts. Um, I do know that at Bonaparte Lake, they did have enough ice up there, which is on the north half where my dad has property. And so they had some really beautiful fish that they were able to get there. So, but we just, have to continually have to empower our people to understand the necessity of engaging in positive and culturally appropriate and sustainable stewardship. And so I'll say one last thing. We have a biochar machine that we were able to secure from some grants from the state as well as from the EPA. And so we've really gone into the use of biochar wood chippers and other machines to try to limit the fire and the smoke during times like this right now, because a lot of people like to burn, their residue, and we want them to limit that and just chip their wood if they have a, fire slash that needs to be destroyed. But we're using that biochar to fill our gardens and make sure that we continue to have successful gardens on the reservation. So, but I did look at your website, and I know that wildfire risk is a really high indicator, and drought exposure and drinking water contamination is up there. But with our forested land, it's crucial that we have as many steps taken to educate our community members about how to prevent and stop wildfire and how to fight it when it's there. So with that, that concludes my presentation. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and to work with Thriving together. I hope that we continue to be partners. I've met Naomi. I know she works in one of our downstairs offices on the below first floor, and so she may not get as much daylight as I get. I have the chance to appreciate the Keller Ridge, and there's still a little bit of snow on top of Keller, but I've met her and I know her family, and in fact, her grandmother and my mother were bowling partners. They used to like to go bowling, and my mother used to be a hairdresser, and so all those women had this really big hair back in that time, and Christine Peasley, like my mother, Geraldine Gabriel, they like to have their fancy hairdos. So I don't have a fancy hairdo. I just have long hair. So, but it started getting gray when I was in seventh grade, and it's been like that since I've had my children. So I just tease people and say, you can call me the Silver Fox, because my married name was Fox. But anyway, Lean Lump, thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you, Yvette. This was really great information and storytelling, highlighting how the upstream work at the policy level, and also grounding us in tribal leadership and the sovereignty and the enduring responsibility for all of us to care for our land and water. So extremely important. Thank you. Just want to point out, as I've done with the others, like you did a great job too, pointing out the thriving natural world, but also health and cultural identity and that sense of belonging and the ability to pass knowledge and traditions on to future generations and how important it was. So thank you. I appreciate your time. I'm going to skip ahead. There is one more poll. I know we're at time. I think that Meg will be sharing to you all if you'll do that. We were going to do a little Q&A, but I see we're at 11:34, so we'll hold off on that. And let's see, Veronica had a few updates that I need to make sure I share. The next learning session is on June 18th. We'll be talking about belonging and community. Oh, I should be sharing my screen. I'm sorry, I'm not. Let me find that share button one more time. Let me just tell you, June 18th, Belonging in Community. You'll see it on the slide deck when we send it out. August 20th, Lifelong Learning and Belonging. And don't forget our upcoming summit on October 21st. Go ahead and save that date in your calendar. That'll be our third annual Thriving Together Summit. It will be in Moses Lake at Big Bend at the ATEC building, the Big Bend Community College. So don't forget that. Connect with your local coalitions if you haven't. There's a Chai landing page on our website. So if you're in Grant County, it's Grant County Chai, Okanagan, Okanagan Chai. And if you're in Chelan or Douglas, it's Our Valley, Our Future. And I think that's how we all today, except for connect with us if you'd like to join the network or if you want to learn more about the network, if you're not already a network member or you want to learn more about the vital conditions that we're talking about today. Give us a call. I will put Veronica's email into the chat so you'll have it since I'm not sharing screen anymore. But just give her a shout out. She'll meet with you and talk, answer any questions you may have. So thank you, Canucci. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Yvette. We appreciate all the knowledge you've shared and sharing about your programs. And until next time, thank you all. Have a great day.